Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of our Illinois Wheelchair Basketball virtual camps. Can't believe we're on day 4 already. I think the week is flying by a little bit. Thanks for joining us again today for our premier camp session. We're going to talk through some 2-on-2 defense. But first, just a couple of little announcements to take care of before we get into some of our topics for today. So we've gotten some questions from you all about if our videos will be available after the fact, if you had to miss it or miss a session, or you want to go back and review the session. So we're going to be working to get those up on our Illinois Wheelchair Basketball YouTube channel for you all. We will send out a link or a message in some way, probably on our social media, about how to access those on YouTube. And I'm thinking it'll be probably the middle of next week before we have those up. So keep your eye out for that. We want to make sure that you can continue to access this content, especially if you missed the session. We don't want you to have to miss out on the content we had to share. So everything will be available on our YouTube channel. Just give us a little bit of time to put it up, make sure it looks good for you guys. Also, so we all have our coaching clinic session this afternoon. We've got our last individual skill session tomorrow morning, which is going to be our athletic trainer, Connor Doherty, going through some different exercises and workouts you can do in the gym with your athletes. And then tomorrow afternoon, we're going to have our Q&A session with our Illini student athletes. We've got Steve Serio, we've got Gail Gang, we've got Helen Freeman, we've got Ryan Niswander. So really great student athletes to come in and give some information. And also during that session, we're going to have a special Illini giveaway for anyone on that call, on the Zoom portion of that call. So make sure you attend, sign up to attend. We're going to put the link to register for that. It's a separate link. It's not included with the individual skills camp link or the premier camp link or the coaching clinic link. It's a separate link. So we're going to put that link probably in the comments to ensure that you can register for that. Be on that call. We'll choose a name at random for some kind of Illini gear giveaway. All right. So make sure you join us for that. That's tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And just a final reminder, as we're going through our 2-on-2 defensive work today, if you have questions at any point in time, just drop them in the Q&A and we'll be happy to answer them either as we go along, if it makes sense to answer it there, or when we get to the designated time at the end, which will be about 15 or 20 minutes before the call ends. Okay, so with that, we're gonna jump into our content for today. So today we're talking about 2-on-2 defensive reads. I talked to you guys way back when on Monday about one-on-one defense, and Coach Bushy now is taking you through some one-on-one offense and some 2-on-2 offense. And now we're going to finish it up with some 2-on-2 defensive reads. And 2-on-2 defense really is the counter to good one-on-one offense. Generally, when you're here in person in our camps, we'll teach one-on-one offense, and then we'll teach 2-on-2 defense as its counter, because that's, you know, really how you guard good one-on-one offense is with 2-on-2 defense. We can also guard good 2-on-2 offense with good 2-on-2 defense. What's really important to remember and keep in mind is that we don't forget any of the principles that we talked about in one-on-one defense. Whenever I'm coaching our student athletes here at Illinois, we always talk about we don't ever do anything in isolation. And so as we're going through 2-on-2 defense, keep in mind what we talked about on Monday with our basic one-on-one defensive principles. Those are all going to link into what we talk about here with 2-on-2. It's really hard to be a great one-on-one defender, or sorry, 2-on-2 defender, if you're not a really good one-on-one defender first. So we can't just skip over something or forget about it once we've already learned it. Everything is connected, all right? Everything is connected and done, not in isolation. Some other things we want to think about with our 2-on-2 defense, we still want to be dictating and attacking, right? We talked about this with one-on-one defense on Monday. We, as two individuals on one side of the court or across the top of the court, want to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to tell the offense on that side of the court what they're going to do, how they're going to execute. We know what we want to take away, we're going to take it away. So you want to be a dictating defense, we want to be an attacking defense. Whenever we're in 2-on-2 defense as well, we're also technically what we always refer to as guarding 1.5 players, right? And this kind of refers back to one of the questions that we had on Monday, when you're on defense in one-on-one situation and you have a pretty significant mismatch that's not in your favor. You're having to guard someone who maybe is taller than you are, a bit faster than you are, a higher classification, and how long can you expect somebody to guard that one person? And I mentioned that we would talk about that on Thursday. Well, this is what we do, right? Like in theory, you're always guarding 1.5 players. So you're guarding the player that you're guarding, but you also have an eye on the player that your teammate is guarding. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit. So keep the concept of always guarding 1.5 players in mind, because your teammates are going to be there to help you. If we link this back also to, for those of you that were in our coaching clinic session yesterday afternoon with Coach Frogley, and he was talking about long-term athlete development, we're going to be talking about this today at a premier camp level. Okay, so while we're going to go over some things that we would teach at individual skills camp, we're going to have the context of this teaching and learning in premier camp. And we can think of this from like a train to train perspective, where we're working on decision training, where yes, we're teaching the basics of this skill, but we're also teaching that it can happen anywhere on the court at any point in time, that it doesn't just happen in one designated position on the court, which is kind of where we're going to be showing it from today from an instructional perspective. So, think about your college level, your junior national team levels. This is kind of where we would start teaching that decision training methodology and teaching 2-on-2 defense at this particular level. Okay, so we can move on into our first slide. So when we think about 2-on-2 defense, you're going to hear these 3 words come up a lot: see, anticipate, and communicate. And these 3 principles will apply in all of the defensive reads we're going to talk about today. We have 4 different reads that we're going to talk through. These 3 principles are going to be key as we go through what the responsibilities of each defender is within a particular defensive read. Okay. So when we talk about see, we're talking about keeping your head on a swivel. So we want to make sure we are looking at just more than the person we're guarding. I think we can all imagine the player who we see, especially if I'm thinking about it from an offensive perspective, and with Coach Bushy, what he was talking about yesterday with attacking backs, right? If I've got my back to an offensive player and I'm only looking at the person I'm guarding, I'm pick bait, right? Like I am easy to pick and get out of the defense. So I want to ensure that I'm not just looking at the player that I'm guarding, but I'm also having my eyes on the player that my teammate is guarding, that what's behind me, right? So that I don't get picked. And so I kind of think about that from a perspective of, I want to see behind or check my shoulders or have my head on a swivel or whatever terminology you want to use every 2 seconds. Wheelchair basketball is constantly changing. I don't think anything ever stays the same for more than 2 seconds. And so every 2 seconds, we should be reminding ourselves, okay, check your shoulders, check your shoulders. What's changed? What's changed? What am I having to reassess now? Okay. So we're going to see, we want to see our matchup. We want to see our teammates matchup. Next, we're going to talk about anticipating. Okay. And when we talk about anticipating, we talk about it from a perspective of identifying threats. Generally when you're playing against another team, or even especially when you're in practice, you know who the threats on the other team are offensively. You know who their main scorers are. You know who their pickers generally are, who their divers usually are, where people want to score from, how they want to score. And so you're thinking about anticipating from, what's the most likely way the offense will attack? I want to identify that, anticipate that, and then understand, when we talk about communicate here in a second, understand how we want to defend and take that away. That's our job as defenders, is to think about the most likely way the offense is going to attack and then do what we have to do to take that away. Okay, that requires us to think early and anticipate early. When we talk about anticipating here at U of I, we don't wait until the offense gets down and gets into their offensive set and starts attacking. We talk about anticipating in transition to know where offensive players are in relation to us and how we're going to defend. So anticipating is a huge part of just defense in general, but we're really going to start talking about it here in 2-on-2 defense. I have 2 other cues listed under there with anticipating, with being ready to be flat and denying the hook. We'll talk about these a little bit more as we go along, but these are concepts that when we say be ready to be flat or deny the hook, this indicates we're anticipating the play, right? Being ready to be flat, meaning that if there's been an angle created for a pick and roll and our back is turned to the person that's going to pick us, we know that that pick is coming and we can sag in under that pick. We'll see some examples of that as we move forward today. And then denying the hook, which basically means ensuring that an offensive player that's picking or cutting, that wants to create some contact and some constructive interference with you, you don't let them get their foot plate in your rim, right? So that they can hook your chair. We've all been in that situation. It's so frustrating, right? Where our chair gets hooked. We want to be prepared to deny that and allow that contact to happen on our tire, not our rim. The last principle we're going to chat about before we get into the actual reads that we're going to talk through is communicating. And I know that we've talked about communicating in every session here this week, and its importance cannot be overstated. I think communication is one of the most important skills that any wheelchair basketball athlete can have. And as you move up the chain from introductory player to a juniors level to if you go to college or if you're a national team level, the specificity and the frequency of your communication is going to have to increase. So when we think about communicating as a principal, we want to talk to defend what you anticipate. So it's not enough just to anticipate how the offense is going to attack. We have to communicate that. We have to say it. If I know that I'm guarding someone who likes to cut, I'm going to tell my teammate, hey, I need you to have my back. Help me guard the cut, right? I'm going to communicate that. I'm not just going to keep it to myself. We also have to talk through the play as it changes. Like I mentioned with seeing, wheelchair basketball changes very fast. And so if we're not communicating what we're seeing, what we're doing as the play is evolving and as the play is going, then our teammates aren't going to know what we're doing. We're not going to know what our teammates are doing, and we won't have a plan for what to do next. We won't be able to adjust and readjust and make a change as quickly as we need to, okay? So I think sometimes what we hear, and I think maybe I mentioned this on Monday, people are afraid to say the wrong thing. It's better to say the wrong thing than to say nothing at all. At least your teammates know what you're thinking, right? And that gives them a starting point. Whereas if you don't say anything at all, they have no idea what you're thinking and what you're doing. And so it's really hard for them to defend based off of that. So just keep that in mind. Like, even if you think you're going to say the wrong thing, or even if you do say the wrong thing, that's okay. Our players here say the wrong thing. Our national team level athletes say the wrong thing. It's okay. It's just the starting point, and then you and your teammate can go from there. So as we go through these next 4 defensive reads, keep these things in mind. See, anticipate, communicate, okay? So the way this is gonna work as we move forward is that for each of the reads, we're gonna show you the instructional DVD clip of that first. You'll hear some instruction coming from that DVD. And then we'll come through, talk about it a little bit, and then we'll show you some live game video at a bit slower speed than we did before, so that you can see some of these reads as they're taking place. And again, noting that they're taking place really in different places on the court, and they don't look the same every single time. Another couple things about the 4 reads, the first 3 that we're going to talk about are all either on or off ball reads. So you don't necessarily have to be guarding a pick and roll situation for the first 3 reads to happen. So keep that in mind. The last read we'll talk about is particularly and specifically an on-ball read. We won't teach how to jump a shooter behind a screen today, because that takes us into 3-on-3 triple switch reads. So just something to keep in mind as well. If you're thinking like, well, we've got all these reads we're covering, but we're not talking about how to jump a shooter behind a screen. That's for another time, another webinar somewhere in the future, because that moves us into some 3-on-3 reads, okay? All right, so let's get into our first read that we're going to talk about. And this first read is what we call go over or go through. You can hear both terminologies used when we talk about this. So we're gonna watch the DVD clip, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
The first read is called going through. We make this read when the offense sets a bad pick. This read allows us to keep matchups and deny outside shots. As the offense starts to pick, the defender tells his teammate, pick coming on your right. The defender stays with the picker, trying to deny the pick if they can. When the picker is 1 chair length away from the defense, the defender decides that a pick is bad because there is enough space for his teammate to go through and stay with the offense. He tells his teammate, go through. The defender being picked fakes in towards the key to move the picker closer to the basket and get more room. she stays with her matchup and she says, "I'm going through." As they finish, each calls out the number of their matchup again, and each defender makes sure they see the whole court.
Okay, so now that we've seen some instruction with 2-on-2 defense and going through or going over, we just want to talk through a couple of those concepts. The important indicator with going through or going over is that it is a bad pick. As you saw in the video, there was a lot of space for that defender to go through or go over and stay with their matchup. There's also an opportunity to create that space where we talked about the defender guarding the person being picked for, faking in, moving that pick to create that space to go through. That's where we elevate this skill to more of a premier camp level or college level, international level, is that we want to be super active and deceptive as a one-on-one defender in that moment, because that allows us the opportunity to move that pick around, okay? So it's a bad pick, and our teammate guarding the pick has good wheel position. We talked about what good wheel position looks like on Monday, good axle to caster position. So our teammate that's guarding the picker has good positioning, okay? Meaning that they can stay with their matchup, all right? We talked about faking in already, where you wanna be active, you wanna be deceptive as a defender. So we're gonna fake in, and then we're gonna go over to stay with our matchup. Usually when we teach this, we talk about going over or going through being a very small percentage of defensive reads that are generally made. And it still is. It's probably, maybe around 10%. I wouldn't say any more. But we see this as a growing read now that teams are starting to make, because offensively, what teams are looking to do more and more often now are isolate mismatches, especially like class 4-5s who tend to be bigger and a bit more functional against 1s and 1-5s who tend to be a bit smaller and have a little bit less function to work with on court. We see that evolution of the game happening. And so conversely, defensively, we have to adjust as well. So if we need to go over or go through to stay with a matchup, particularly to keep height on height, then that's something that we want to do. So I know personally, as I've watched the game over the past, maybe 4 or 5 years, I've seen that evolution really start to happen, especially bigs trying to get those mismatches, right? So we have quite a few examples to show of this and to show what it looks like happening on the court. And again, happening at different places on the court, which is what elevates this skill to being able to teach it at premier level. Okay, so if we'll go into our clips. So on this first clip, what you're gonna watch, we have the ball handler coming down at the top of the screen with the ball. You're gonna see number 13 in orange on our team go out to meet the ball handler, and you're going to see her go over a pick that's set for the ball handler. Okay, so we'll see that again in slow motion, where she's able to fit through some space. And as you can see, that was a little bit unconventional, because at that point in time, we didn't have anybody guarding the picker. So what number 13 on our team, her name's Katie Dandino, what she was reading is that she needed to go over and through that pick because the player with the ball is a really incredible three-point shooter. So we didn't want that pick to happen and not have anyone there to be able to guard her once she came off that pick. All right, so we wanted to make sure we got out there, we got through that pick, we stayed over, and we stayed with our matchup. We had a 4-5 guarding a 4-5. We have height guarding height. Okay, can we see that one more time? Okay, so we'll move into our next clip of going over. And we kind of have the same scenario again. I want you guys to watch the top of the screen. We have number 13 for Alabama with the ball at the top of our screen. We have number 13 from our team again, guarding her. And again, watch how she continues to work to stay over, to keep her matchup, because her matchup is the number one threat. Her matchup is the one that we have designated that we don't want to score and that we want to take out of their offense. So again, she's getting contact and working really hard to stay over that pick. So she's readjusting her chair. She's being deceptive like we talked about, faking a little bit to move that picker around. Okay, she's not just sitting in one position. She's not sagging off. She's up. She's being aggressive to force that pass to happen. Okay, we can move forward. Okay, so here what we're gonna watch is the bottom of the screen. This is some national team video from Rio. We're gonna watch the bottom of the screen. I will have number 10 in white with the ball. And when the play starts or when the clip starts, she's gonna be more towards the elbow. And watch how our defenders, we have Becca Murray and Gail Gang, and Rose Hollerman's there a little bit too. Watch how our defenders stay over. Number 10 for Germany is a really good outside shooter. Again, someone that we wanted to take away from the offense. This wasn't necessarily to keep a classification on classification matchup. This was particularly to keep someone on a shooter. So we can go ahead and let this play. So as you see, we jump out and we jump through the pick. We stayed over. Okay, it was a good, or not a good pick. There was plenty of room. And we had Axel to caster position on that picker. We were able to be aggressive enough to take that away. Can we show that one more time just to see how aggressive they were with wheel position and on chairs? Again, a bad pick, we can go through. The other thing that you can notice in this one, and I know you guys can't hear sound, but you know, if you can see the faces, you can see how much they're communicating as it's happening. Becca was constantly communicating to both Gail and Rose about what she needed. We could also see that Gail actually almost left number 4 to go to number 10 in white. But Becca was communicating that she went through and that she was staying on her matchup, which allowed Gail to stay on her matchup and actually, honestly, be a little more aggressive when that loose ball happened. So that's where we can see communication being really important in that as well. Okay, can move on to the next clip. Okay, what we're gonna watch here is the top of the screen. So same game, we're gonna watch the top of the screen. And we're going over this pick because we actually want to keep some pressure on a ball handler. We have a lower class player that's gonna have the ball up there, I believe. And what the read was here was that it wasn't going to be a good pick. There was enough space to get through. You guys see Rose Hollerman, number 15 in blue, has contact with the German big girl, okay? And that's Desi Miller at the top. That's going to be going through, okay, to stay on the ball handler, to keep pressure on her. Because if we think situationally here, and again, we're at this premier level, we're thinking situationally, you take a glance up at the shot clock, it's at 3 seconds. And so while the person with the ball may not necessarily be a great outside shooter, I think what the athletes did a really incredible job of here is recognizing this is a situational basketball opportunity, only 3 seconds on the shot clock. We want to keep pressure on that person with the ball. We're gonna go through this pick, okay? So we can let this run. So we're anticipating, and then we are able to stay out. So I wanna stop right here, if we can. If you watch number 9, Desi Miller in blue, you can see that what anticipating looks like in this situation, she has her eyes on the ball handler right now. Ball's at the top of the key. You can see that she has her eyes on the ball handler, but you could also see as the video plays, we can back it up a little bit actually. As it plays, you can see where she's looking to the other side of the court. She sees the ball handler, she sees who she's guarding, she sees where the diver is. So she actually has her eyes on 3 to 4 different players within this possession to understand what her read needs to be, right? So we're reading, we're having situational basketball. So see, anticipate, communicate. We stay through and we're actually able to get a shot clock violation off of this play. Okay, I think we have 1 or 2 more clips. So again, top of the screen, number 15 in white, Rose Hollerman, is up guarding the ball. Again, thinking situationally, we take a glance at the shot clock. There's about 5 seconds left. Not only is this situational, but we've got classification and height matchups here that we want to continue to take away as well. So we can go ahead and let this clip play. You see, we stay over. It was a small moment in time where a pick was happening here, wasn't a good pick, there was enough space, and we stay over. Okay, we can move on to the next clip. I think next one is the last one. So this is one we actually showed you on Monday for some good one-on-one defense, but this was also really great two-on-two defense. What you're gonna watch is the bottom of the screen with Ali Ibanez, number 12. And I think Katie Dandino is gonna be the other defender that comes in, and we're gonna see another situation off ball where we go over to keep better matchups for ourselves. So in this situation, we kept Katie, number 13 on our team, on height. And we kept Allie on someone who's a little bit smaller. Allie did a great job there of faking to move that pick right here. She faked, moved the pick, and she was able to stay with her matchup. So again, hopefully through these clips, you'll see there's a lot of scenarios that we found where we went over. This is something, again, like I said, that we're seeing more and more, and that you can actually control and make this read happen. I think sometimes we think like, oh, this going over read, it's just going to randomly happen and we'll play it as it happens. You can make the read happen, just as you saw Allie did there, right? Like she controlled that situation and knew she wanted to stay over, and so she faked and made it work. So that's going over. Okay, now we're going to move into our next read, which is going to be going under. Okay, so we're going to listen to the DVD here and we'll come back for some more video.
The second read in two-on-two defense is called going under. We make this read when the offense sets a good pick, but we can maintain wheel position. This read allows us to keep matchups, but gives up the outside shot. As the offense starts to pick, the defense tells his teammate, pick coming on your right. The defender stays with the picker, trying to deny the pick if they can. When the picker is one chair length away from the defender decides that the pick is good, but that he has wheel position. He tells his teammate, go under. His teammate fakes away from the basket to move the picker out and create more space. Then she turns towards the baseline and goes under the picker and her teammate, picking up her matchup on the other side. Both defenders call out the numbers of their matchups and check their shoulders to see the whole court.
Okay, so that is going under. So this is probably the defensive read that we see happen the least on court, but like as I'm going to mention again, the game is evolving, and as that evolution happens, in order to keep matchups, particularly without the ball, we see this read happening more and more. So again, just as reminders, there's going to be a good pick, which means the offensive player setting the pick has good axle to caster position. Our defender has good wheel position on that offensive player setting the pick, right? So that he or she controls that person's chair. The person that is being picked, okay, wants to, again, be deceptive with their chair and fake like they're going to go over the pick, communicating what they're doing, communicating what they're reading, okay? And then we're going to go under our teammate and get our matchup again and reestablish our matchups. And like was mentioned in the instructional video, we do this most often either off ball or when the person that we're going under to keep our matchup on isn't a great outside shooter. Okay, so again, we're making on ball versus off ball reads. These may be different reads dependent upon that one variable. The other thing I want to mention, and this goes back to the C portion, and it touched on it briefly in the instructional DVD, but as you're going under, so the defender that's responsible for going under, you want to check your shoulders as you're going under to reestablish position, because just like we talked about yesterday in two-on-two offense, the offense wants to attack backs. So as soon as I as a defender sag in and start to go under, okay, I want to make sure that I'm not getting cut on off my back. And that's something that we can talk about and I can show on the whiteboard towards the end. if we have time for questions and stuff like that. Okay, so let's go into the video for this. We only have a couple of clips because it doesn't happen super often. So I think we have 2 clips to show here. All right, so if we're going under, where you're actually going to watch is the top right-hand portion of the screen. We're going to have an off-ball matchup with class 1s and class 4-5s, which you'll see on the top of the screen. There's no ball, so there's no threat right now for, there's no opportunity, sorry, for anybody to score, particularly on that side. So we want to keep matchups, all right? So top kind of right-hand side of the screen, it'll come more into focus as the video goes. You can see our class 1 goes under to keep their matchup, and our class 4-5 can keep hers. Now, this isn't in a traditional pick and roll scenario, right? This is what we mean where these reads are going to look different all over the court, and they're rarely going to look the same. And so this wasn't your traditional pick and roll situation. This was a situation where they were just trying to move our defenders around to get a mismatch. They were trying to get their class 4-5 on our class 1-0, right? So we chose to go under. We sent our class 1 under with their class 1. And now you can see our 4-5 and their 4-5 are matched up. Okay, and we can move on and watch the last clip. Where it's going to happen here is on the left-hand side of the screen. Again, you're going to see a 4-5 and a 1-0. This is where you're traditionally going to see these types of reads happen. We have one of our 4-5s, one of their 4-5s, one of our class 1s, and one of their class 1s. So left-hand side of the screen. Off ball again, as you can see. So it's not quite as evident as it was in the last clip. Can we roll it one more time? Our class 1 goes under our 4-5, okay, to ensure that our 4-5 can stay matched up on theirs, okay? And again, those 2 reads, those 2 clips, that read only works because our class 4-5 has chair position and chair contact on their 4-5. If they did not, this read would not work, and basically our class 1 would seal out our 4-5, okay? It wouldn't be effective. So that's going under. Again, doesn't happen a ton, but we wanted to show you where it can happen at times in games. Okay, now we're moving on to the last read, which happens most on the court, probably 65, 70% of the time. It's called turn in and switch. Again, this is an on-ball and off-ball read that we'll be talking about.
The last read in 2-on-2 defense is called turn in and switch. We make this read when the offense sets a good pick and we don't have wheel position. This read allows us to defend layups but gives up the outside shot and can give up a mismatch. As the offense starts to pick, the defense tells his teammate, pick coming on your right. The defender stays with the picker, trying to deny the pick if he can. When the picker is 1 chair length away from the defense, the defender decides that the pick is good and that he is beat and will not have wheel position. He tells his teammate, turn in, and he waits for his teammate to turn in. His teammate fakes away from the basket to move the picker out and give more space. Then she turns towards the baseline and turns in and switches to guard the picker, saying, I'm turning in, switch. The defenders then switch matchups as soon as both defenders have inside position on the picker. They call out the numbers of the new matchups and check their shoulders to see the whole court. One important point to help you is anytime you feel beat, it is usually a switch.
Okay, so that's turn in and switch. Again, some reminders that we want to look at with turn in and switch. It's a good pick. And like was mentioned in the video, anytime you feel like you're beat or anytime you feel like that you're not going to be able to get good defensive position, that's when we're more than likely going to use turn in and switch. This is a situation where we'll generally see people, if they know they're about to get beat, they'll stop pushing. And this is really where that principle of like you still have to come up with the pick applies. So even if you feel like you're about to get beat, you've still got to go with that pick. So it's a good pick. We know we're about to get beat. It's not good position. The person that is guarding the person being picked for, right, has to be ready. This is where we're being ready to be flat, okay? This is what we're talking about with being flat. I'm actually going to want to go back to that instructional video to show something. And we can just pick a section where it shows the defender sagging in. Yeah, so let's just start right here. And
as the offense starts to pick, the defense tells
of course,
his
we stop it
teammate,
at the one section
pick
where
coming,
it's talking.
pick coming
That's
on
all
your
right,
right.
though. That gives us a chance
The
to
defender stays with the picker,
see it in slow
trying to
motion.
deny the pick if he can. When
Right,
the
stop
picker,
there. Okay, so at this moment in time, this is what the concept of being ready to be flat looks like. And when we say getting flat, that means we want both of our defenders in the same plane. So as soon as the defender guarding the pick E, okay, comes in and gets level with their teammate, that's what we mean by getting flat. Let it go just a little bit.
is one chair length away from the defense, the defender decides that the pick is good and that he is beat and will not have wheel position. He tells his teammate, turn in, and he waits for his teammate to turn in. His teammate fakes away from the basket to move the picker out and give more space. Then she turns towards the baseline and turns in and switches to guard the picker, saying, I'm turning in, switch.
There. Okay, so this is the other place I wanted to stop and talk about. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with going under as well. So this is the moment that it's really critical to see behind. Okay, when we talk about see, anticipate, and communicate, at this moment in time, when the defender that was guarding the pick E starts to come in, turn in and switch, come under the pick, or go under like we saw in the previous videos, their back is facing the offensive player that they were just guarding, right? So the defender that was just guarding the pick E, her back is now facing the person that she's guarding. Now, in this instructional DVD, you see that that player just kind of goes back to the top of the key and in a more traditional pick and roll sense. As you move from lower level playing up until like first getting started, that's what I mean by lower level, not worse, but just introduction to the game, moving up to college division, moving up to possible national team. Okay, what you'll see offensive players start to read is to cut off of the back of that defender that's sagging in, right? That's attacking backs. If we're not seeing behind in that moment, okay, we're susceptible to a cut. So seeing behind in that moment is of the ultimate importance. You want to see for the reset. That's kind of the lingo that we use. Watch for the reset or see the reset. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward into some of the game film. Okay, so when we watch this, let's watch the top of the screen. Okay, we're going to have Ali Ibanez and Riley Youngdahl here at the top of our screen with a turn in and switch. Again, this is happening in the middle of the court, not in a quarter-court setting. This is in a pressing situation, actually. Ali anticipates the pick coming. Riley has great contact. And now we've reestablished on new matchups. Okay, so they do a really great job of seeing, anticipating, and communicating. Okay, we can move to the next one. Here we are going to watch, I believe it's the right side of the screen. It happens off ball. Okay, you'll have Emily Oberst and Ali Ibanez again with our turn in and switch. We anticipate. Okay, a little less traditional, but again, we anticipate that happening early. Okay, we're ready for it. Can move to the next clip. Here we're going to watch, I believe we're watching at the top of the screen with the ball handler and the picker who is behind her. So we're watching Becca Murray and Lindsay Zerbrug from Team USA here with their turn in and switch. So we're going out to the ball handler. Oh, my mistake, wrong clip for me. This is actually happening at the top of the screen. My bad, I'm confusing this with a different one. So can you go back for me, please? Thanks. So this is happening over at the top of the screen, off ball. We have a class 1 on a 4-5 and a 3-5 and a 1-0 working together. Let's show it one more time since I messed that up. So again, we come in, we switch, we get chair contact. Our 3-5 comes in and gets chair contact, and then we can move up to the class 1. Okay, so this is a situation where it's not necessarily a pick and it's happening off ball. Okay. This is the clip that I thought was coming up. So you're going to watch the ball handler at the top of the key, and the picker that's right beside her, actually, she's going to come back up to try to set a pick for the ball handler. And you're going to see Lindsay and Becca execute a turn in and switch. Okay, so the pick comes, they sag under it. So Lindsay's going to go out to the ball handler, anticipates the pick coming, and we sag under. Okay, so this turn in and switch happens the most often on court. This is why we talked about on Monday. It's really important to be able to, at least for a few seconds, guard someone who is a different classification, who's a bit taller, who might be a bit faster, right? That it's not always going to be neat and tidy that you can keep one matchup the entire time. Again, especially at the higher levels where we're talking about this today. So, and as you can see, you don't have to do it for a long time on your own. You're going to have teammates there to help you. Okay, last read we're going to go into oh, sorry, I forgot we have one more clip. We're going to watch the top of the screen here. We have Marley Wagstaff from our team and Abby Farrell. So top left-hand corner of the screen there. We'll watch them do a turn in and switch. Abby anticipates the pick coming, knows that the ball handler is not engaged and ready for a shot. Okay, and then she gets under that pick really well. Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to move into our last read that we're making that I said is an on-ball read, and we're going to talk about our half jump. Okay, we talk about this. Some people call it L defense. Some call it a yo-yo. Some call it half jumps. Again, we're going to talk about this from a perspective of wheels, voice, and hands. Like we mentioned on Monday, with what wheels, voice, and hands looks like and sound like. And again, for today's purposes, we're just going to talk through half jumps and L position. Okay. So we can go ahead and, is the next clip video or, okay, perfect. So some key things to remember, we don't have an instructional DVD for half jumps, so we're just gonna talk through some of those reads. A couple things to think about when we think about our half jumps. One, we wanna be physical on that diver. We're gonna show some game film in a second where you're gonna see our athletes being incredibly physical on the dive and pushing that dive out and away from the edge of the key. The further we can push it out, the better percentages it is for our defense to cause a low percentage shot, okay? So we're gonna be physical on the dive and play high on the half jump side. And that way we're being aggressive, we're trying to deny a great pick, we're ensuring that we're in control of that play, okay? When we're in a half jump, what we're really doing is trying to either put the person behind the screen in an indecisive position, or we actually want that person to shoot. We know that they're not a great shooter, but we also don't want them just sitting behind the screen with no pressure on them. So we're gonna half jump, we're gonna be really aggressive, and we want them to keep their eyes down and in a dribble where they can't see anything else going on. You're also gonna see in the video that we show in a second, our athletes recover on the dribble, and we'll show what that looks like too. When they tuck back in after being the person that half jumps, you'll see what allows them to recover. And then with the mechanics of the half jump, we'll have one person going out, but not losing wheel position, and their teammate tucking in to stay physical on that dive. So those are the things that we're gonna think about, along with obviously communication, constant, loud, clear communication, okay? So let's go into our game video. So what we're watching is right at the front of the screen here. We have a ball handler behind the screen, and we're gonna watch these two athletes in their half jump. So you see the high person comes out and the low person's out. Now the high, you can see their mouths. They're communicating who's out, who's in. They recover in when the person's dribbling. And you can see we kept the person behind the screen indecisive. She didn't know whether we were gonna jump, whether we were not gonna jump. And now we've forced her to get rid of the ball. So they did a really nice job there. Now we're gonna watch the low part of the screen. We got Rose Hollerman and Becca Murray here. Again, we're physical on the dive. There's lots of communication that happens. We keep that shooter indecisive, keep them down in their dribble, and do a really nice job of forcing a low percentage shot. Here we're watching the left side of the screen. It's a little bit hard to see, okay? But same thing. We're keeping that person behind the screen indecisive. She doesn't know if we're jumping or half jumping. And then our last clip here, we're watching the top of the screen. We've got a dive pushed out. We're physical on the dive. And we're using our hands. When we think about wheels, voice, and hands, we're using our hands to actually get a hand up on the shot now that we've made that player behind the dive move. Okay, really creating a low percentage shot here. Again, physical on the dive, one person out, one person in. Okay. So those are our 4 reads. I'm going to stop here to see if we have any questions that anybody has about 2-on-2 defense that we can answer. So it looks like we've only got 1 question so far. So again, if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A. Why do you always protect the baseline? Oh man, that's a great question. I think we could have a whole session on why we always protect the baseline. When we teach protecting the baseline, we generally teach it within a 5-on-5, our 5-on-5 half-court defensive principles. And the number 1 defensive principle that is generally an absolute, and we don't have a lot of absolutes in wheelchair basketball, right? Things are changing often. But one of the absolutes that we have in wheelchair basketball is always deny baseline. Nothing good is ever going to happen if you let people go through baseline. If you let class 1s go through on the baseline, generally what we let them go through, we think we want to let them go through because they're smaller, they have less function, we don't think they're going to be able to do anything, but they can kind of get into the middle of our defense and just wreak havoc. They can go pick, they can go seal, they can go get their other teammates open. The baseline is also somewhere where it's really hard to bring help to, right? It's a long way to go for most people. And it's a really hard position to get to from any of the other spots, right? So the number 1 rule is always protect the baseline. And that's just because nothing good ever happens. Again, think about if a bigger player, if we just let them go baseline, they're going to post up on us, right? So we're going to allow way too much havoc to be wreaked on our defense if we let folks go through on baseline. I hope that answers your question. Okay, our next question. Can you talk about some ways to explain this to youth, i.e. switching? What types of drills would you use? Anything different than what we saw? So I think ways to explain this to youth, if you're thinking about this from like the way we would teach it at individual skills camp, I think you could talk through it just like we did in the instructional DVDs, right? Where you slow it down, you may actually have to walk through one of these reads and it takes your entire practice, right? Just walking your athletes, your young learning athletes through the mechanics of what going over looks like, switching looks like. I know with even some newer players, what I have done at times is I've asked permission to grab the back of their chair and push them through some of the reads so that they understand where they have to go and what it feels like to move in those ways. So when you're teaching this to young players, that would be my suggestion. That's how we do it at our individual skills camp. We teach one of these reads and then we let them go practice it. And then we stop it as often as we need to in order to help them understand what all of these different reads look like. When we're teaching at the more advanced level, like we've been doing here, what we'll let them do is just go into a 2-on-2 defensive quarter-court drill and just let it play live. And we allow them to begin to make decisions. Then what I'll do as a coach is I'll watch and I'll only stop it if I see a mistake maybe made once or twice in a row. If I see them not self-correcting, kind of goes along with what Coach Frogley was talking about yesterday with if you can see them start to self-correct, then they're getting it and you can probably let the drill go. If they're not self-correcting, that's when I would jump in and stop and ask them some questions about what they're reading and what they're seeing. Drills to work on this, you're exactly right. Repetition is important. It's kind of one of the things where we do it over and over. We run a lot of 2-on-2 here at U of I. So I'm thinking about, 2-on-2 quarter court. And actually I can pop over to the whiteboard real quick just to show you what some of those look like on court and what some of the terminology means. So if we've got our court here, okay, and we've got our hoop and our 3-point line and half court's way up here, okay? If we think about a drill, a 2-on-2 quarter court drill, remember quarter court is if we divide the court down the middle here, and we can run 2-on-2 quarter court, which means they have all of this space. Got the sideline over here. The offense has all of this space to attack, and the defense has this space to continue or to defend. The reason that we keep it in the quarter court here is because the defense has less space to guard, right? And so defense is a little bit easier when you have less space. Offense wants more space, defense wants to take space away. So as a coach, you can put a constraint on to control space to help your younger players understand these reads as well. We still run quarter court at the college and the international level as well. We can just add other constraints in. Again, you can change where your players recover to. You can have your offense recover and always start up high, and your defense always start and recover at the 3-point line. You can change it up. You can have your defense choose where they want to recover to. You can have set spots. So there are lots of different constraints you can put on this. You can use a shot clock. You can change the shot clock every single possession. So there's lots you can do. We want to challenge our athletes more. We take the space constraint out, and we actually will let them go 2-on-2. 2/3 court is usually the most I will extend this, just purely because 2-on-2 becomes really hard in the space of a full court, full width of the court. So we'll extend this out to 2/3 court as well. So now you have to figure out how to guard within a larger space, okay? You can also run this full court. You can run this practice this in a 2-on-2 shadow, where like we talked about on Monday with 1-on-1 defense, where you're starting at the baseline, right? You've got people starting here, and you run it quarter court, right? Or you can extend it to 2/3 court, again, depending upon what you want to do. And just a basic shadow where you're trying to go baseline to baseline. Or you can run it where it starts as a shadow and it ends up into a 2-on-2 quarter court at the other end of the court. Okay, so there's lots of different ways you can practice these 2-on-2 reads and connecting and building it to your 1-on-1 reads, right? These are the same drills that we would use to work on 1-on-1. We're just doing them now in a 2-on-2 context, okay? Really great question. Again, lots of different ways we can work on 2-on-2. So hopefully that answers your question as far as how it relates to how we can teach it to young people, and then also what are some different drills we can use to work on it. If you're thinking about this from a perspective of what can we do during COVID and coronavirus, a couple of different things you can do, and I'm gonna move back away from the whiteboard here. A couple of different things you can do. One, we have a chair skill here at U of I that we call shake and bake. And when we talk about being a deceptive defender, that's a skill, okay? So if I'm doing shake and bake for a chair skill, I'm in a space on my own. And basically all I'm doing is working on moving my chair to be deceptive. So I'm just faking one way, faking the other way, using my head fakes, all while really keeping my hands at the top of my wheels, ready to push. I don't want to move around and fake so much that I'm getting my body or my hands in a position where I'm not ready to push. Right now, my hands are not in a position to push, right? And as we talked about in 1-on-1 defense, okay, it's gonna be really easy for the offense to beat me now with only one move, right? Because my hands are low. So when I'm working on shake and bake, I want my hands to be high, faking on the wheels, and I'm moving my body around, but also keeping it in a position where I'm ready to push. We call that shake and bake. Our athletes are talking while they're doing this because it's a skill, right? So they're communicating things that they would say in a game, and they're working on, we call it shake and bake, all right? So that's one way you can kind of work on that defensive skill that you would use in 2-on-2. The other way, and our student athletes, they absolutely hate this, but it's something that we use at times called imaginary games. And basically what you can do is you're by yourself on a court and you're talking, you're imagining, you can be in a 2-on-2 situation, you can be in a full game situation, it's however you want to imagine the game. So we're making the connection between what we're seeing in our mind and then we're acting it out basically on court. You're by yourself. So you might feel a little bit silly doing this, and I think that's why our athletes don't like it, is it makes them look a little bit silly. But they're on their portion of the court, and they're just talking out everything they see. And we want them to be super specific, like what team are they playing? What players are on their side? Are you jumping? Are you half jumping? How are you recovering? Like literally everything that they're doing and seeing, they have to talk about. And that works on a couple of things. One, it works on you seeing those reads in your head, seeing them executed, visualizing them, and getting that repetitive visualization of what that skill is. And then two, it's working on your communication and your movements within that as well. So those are two things that you can do kind of during this time where we're not allowed to be in practice with each other and not allowed to do any 2-on-2 work. Two ways you can kind of work on that. Okay, got another question. When using the going under read, as the player coming under, how do you just stop this becoming a seal for the offensive picker? That's a great question. I'm actually gonna pop back over to the whiteboard for that and use some of our graphics that Coach Bushy made for us yesterday. So that's a really good question. I'm gonna move these guys out of the way. We're gonna look here on the right side of the court. And we'll have the offense be white, the defense is dark. So when we're talking about going under, the key to going under, okay, is as this pick is coming in, we have axle to caster position. So number one is picking, right? In order to go under, the number one thing the person guarding the picker has to do is have axle to caster position. They have to control space right here and control this person's chair, okay? If they are doing that, if and only if they are doing that, you can go under. Because you're exactly right, and thanks Beth for that question. If we do not have axle to caster position, and we have number two now starting to come around and use this pick, and we try to go under, all this is gonna do is block our teammate from being able to move. And as we go through, we are basically sealing for this person to get in. I've seen it happen quite a few times, right? We're just sealing for that person to get in. So it's really important that if you're the person guarding the picker and you want to stay with that matchup, you have to have axle to caster position. I would say that is like the number one key. Nothing more important there. Particularly if this is a big person or a higher class player. Great question. Okay. Let's see. All right, looks like we have answered all the questions. Thank you all for the great questions that you did have. Hopefully this gives you a little more insight on 2-on-2 defense, ways that you can apply them, and how we would apply them at Premier Camp and how we would teach them at Premier Camp. And honestly, this is how we teach and run this with our student athletes at U of I. Running it on the fly, letting them make decisions, letting them make mistakes, right? Like I think if I could encourage you all, if they're in whatever coaches are on this call, allow your athletes to make mistakes as they're going through this. That's the way they're gonna learn. It's not always gonna look pretty. So thank you all for being here. We'll see some of you who are in the coaching session this afternoon for our Chalk Talk. Again, come with questions. Coach Bushy and I are gonna both be in front of a whiteboard and we're gonna be ready to field your questions about whatever you have technically and tactically with wheelchair basketball. And we may actually have Coach Frogley with us as well from yesterday, who'll be ready to answer some questions too. So we'll see you then. Have a great day.